Yep.
All right. Hello, everyone. I want to do a talk here on ActionCable. Last month, for those that attended, did a talk on WebSockets. Covered the basics of how to create a WebSocket and how to set up pub sub. Had a little demo of ActionCable on that, but this talk I wanted to go through the various components of ActionCable. So before I get into the slides, I have a little app that I'll share that will you can poke around with, and we'll discuss through the talk. It's hosted on Render, which has a it goes offline after some no usage, so it'll take a little bit to come up. Does Zoom not have a chat?
Yeah, it does. So here.
That's on yours.
I mean, you should also have it, but because you're sharing, I don't think it can open it.
Oh, there it is. So, yeah, feel free to go around there. It's when it loads, it's a chat application, so you have a list of groups you can join. Should be a RubyJax group up there, and you can you enter your name and you can play around with the chat. When others join, you'll see their cursor moving around. So again, have fun with that. So let's get this open up. So do a short review on WebSockets and PubSub, and then describe the components of ActionCable, like connections, channels, subscription adapters, and then do a demo going over the code for that app that I just shared. So WebSockets, it's a live continuous connection between a web browser client and the backend Rails server, or any server for that matter. Typically when we're doing things on the web, we're using the HTTP protocol. This protocol calls for the browser requesting a connection, and then when the connection is established, it'll send one message, the server will send one response, and then the connection will be closed. Whereas with WebSockets, we request the connection, but then the connection remains open, and both the client and the server can send and receive messages. On the web, this is, I've seen this good for things that want real-time feedback, such as a chat message, notification service, or with some of the web frameworks that are out there now, being able to, from the server, tell the front end to update things on the front end, so you can have components reload and whatnot. So a couple diagrams here. So basically with HTTP, client sends a request, server processes the body of that request, does some stuff, sends the response back, connection is closed. Whereas with WebSockets, the client makes a request, the server will respond with a handshake, and then the connection will be open. Something I didn't put in this diagram that's worth mentioning, and we'll see with ActionCable later, is the initial request is done over HTTP. I'm not sure that's universal, but most of the examples I've seen, including ActionCable, there's an HTTP request and initial response with a 101 status code indicating a protocol switch. But once that's done, we're no longer using HTTP for message sending. So when we're using ActionCables and WebSockets in general, we're using the pub/sub pattern. This means that the client will connect and will usually initiate a subscription indicating what kind of activity they want to watch for. The server will receive that subscription and can then send events or publish events, or some people call it broadcasting too, for anything that's out there. Just trying to figure out the best way to describe why we use PubSub. I think it's easier to manage connected users instead of having to constantly go through your list of connected clients and figure out who to send what. It's just easier to manage publications. So for getting into ActionCable specifics, one of the first things we'll find is a connection class. So if you were to go into, if you were to start with a new Rails 8 application today, you will, one of the things that will generate is a class, I think it's called ActionCable Connection. And this is a class that one of the functions it typically provides or is typically used is connect. And if you use that, you can inspect the initial request data. So that's your headers, cookies, things you might ordinarily have available to you in the controller. You can access here. And the examples out there will typically use this to authenticate the user. So we'll read the header or the cookies, the session data, and put that in an identified by state. And so that data can be available everywhere. And we can, as I said, authenticate the user before they're allowed to subscribe to any events. Channels are the main construct we'll work with, though. This is a channel represents both an event or an event that was broadcast for, but it's also each channel object. It represents a consumer that's currently connected to it. So we use the channel class to broadcast for events, but the instance level methods are used for client specific things. So we can tell if a client is subscribing, unsubscribing, or it's sending us data. And then broadcasting itself, it can be done from the channel. It can also be done with a global broadcast function, which we'll look at later. Something worth pointing out with channels is you can give it a tag in something called a stream for that is can tell us not only is the client subscribing to this channel, but something specific to this channel. So in the case of the app I'll show later, we have a group, but we want to subscribe to a specific group based on its ID. So we'll stream messages based off of that specific group. Last thing here is subscription adapters. So this is the underlying tooling that will tell ActionCable to use for PubSub. When you generate a new Rails application today, you have a config file. It's config.cable.yml. It will have you using two things. For dev and test, it'll have you use an async adapter, and then for production, we'll have you use solid cable. Async is just handling the messages in memory, and solid cable is actually persisting those messages through the database and then picking them up later as needed. In older versions of Rails, we would use Redis, which is also memory, but highly efficient and comes with its own PubSub functionality. So ActionCable is just tapping into Redis with that. But the default pretty much is solid cable. Solid cable is a library in the solid family of libraries, the other ones being solid cache and solid job, solid queue. And that's just Rails going away from Redis and moving towards using the database. Any questions so far? That was a lot.
Not for me.
All right. So now we'll start looking at some code examples. Let's see. Team-up session open. Okay. What branch am I on? Okay. Trying to make sure I can start that up. No. So here's our app. This is for me, it's running on local. So we have a list of groups. I can join a group, enter my name, hello RubyJax, and then that message shows up. If I were to join as another user, I can also start chatting, and then hard to show with just me on 2 tabs, but my cursor is also being tracked. So when I go to another tab, you can barely see it on the top here.
Pull your tab out. Have to side by sides.
Yeah, I can do that.
Just drag the tab. Yeah.
See, I can. Oh, there we go. You can kind of see it there. Well, resize this a bit so you can see. So on the left, you see there, and then if I move back over, so that's all happening in a WebSocket connection. To show that we have a WebSocket connection, we'll go into the console. On a network, I might have to reload this. So there we have our initial connection. We look at this request. Expand that out a little bit.
I would make it side by side, otherwise it's gonna, because the responses for the socket are gonna come through so fast.
Like so?
Now, like, I think probably the triple dot on the right-hand side.
Oh, you can
Yeah, diamond to the right.
dock.
And now you can,
Yep.
you have a vertical space there.
Can I actually see the data though?
It's inside. Oh, I think it's below.
Yeah, okay. That's better though. So yeah, if we look at the requests, there we go. So we see that it made it get to this WS local host 3000/cable using HTTP. It returned a 101 switching protocols status. But just like any request, we have request and response headers. I guess I can zoom out of the way for a moment there. Nope. So nothing too special there. The only thing is, this is the only thing that we're getting out of HTTP. Everything else going to come through this response, and Firefox here knows that we're using WebSockets, so instead of the response being one payload, it is a continuous stream of messages. So the green arrows are the messages we've sent, the red arrows are the ones that we've received. So the first message should be a subscription. Yep. This is telling us that we're subscribing to the group channel, and then the rest is some metadata that I've sent up. And then we get a response from that, which is no, that's not correct. That's not right. I went too far up.
I would just refresh and get it.
Oh, there it is. Command subscribe. So we send up a subscribe message, metadata, and then the response we get tells us that we confirm the subscription. So that's how the front end of this looks. For the back end, start looking at some files. So since I have this open, this is the subscription adapter configuration. So when you make a new app, it's probably going to look something like adapter async. I've decided to use ActionCable in development, so you can take a look at it, how it works. But this is where you'll select the adapter, and then let's look at the connection first. So we have ActionCable connection. I haven't used it in this app, but if you were to use it, you would probably use the connect method. Might inspect the params or cookies, and then you might set something like current user, find current user, and then if you want that user to be available in your channels, you can use identified by current user. That will delegate current user as a method in your channel object. So you don't have to go searching for this if you want to see your user or anything else that you define here. We don't have an authenticated user. We're just asking you to enter your name in the prompt, and then we generate a session ID for you. So nothing to do here. There's also an ActionCable channel, and you can set up common channel attributes here. But once again, we're not using that right now. So let's look at a real channel, which in this case is group channel. And here we have three methods: subscribe, receive, and unsubscribe. So when we created a subscription, that got processed by this channel. We created a new instance of a channel. And so for as long as that user is connected, this object remains alive, and we can process events. So first thing, we subscribe out is with the subscribe method, and then anytime we're sending data over, so if I want to move my cursor around and send a chat message, that gets picked up in receive, and then if I were to disconnect, that would get processed by unsubscribe. So we have a few interesting methods here. We have broadcast to. I can give this basically the name of the channel that I want. Now, I'm just passing in the ID of the group that I'm currently connected to. And by doing that, it's because this is a broadcast to on group channel, it's extrapolating that into, I believe it's group ID, so it might be 1. And under the hood, I think it's using something called broadcast or broadcasting for, and that also takes anything that you give it, and it will look at the channel and use its name to generate that tag. You can also give it objects. So I could have done group is group group ID, and then I could just broadcast for that group, and that will generate a unique ID based on this record. I don't think it's exactly the ID of the record, but it is unique and consistent, so you can pass objects to it as well. The other thing I commented out here is you could use ActionCable server broadcasts. So if you're outside the channel and you don't want to, for some reason you don't want to reference the channel, you can just use ActionCable server broadcast. And then down here we have both stream for and stream from. Stream for is ultimately calling stream from. I believe it's using the broadcasting, or yes, broadcasting from or for to get the correct name with whatever you pass into it. And so a little confusing with the names, but there is just pointing out there's a difference between stream from and stream for. And then I'm trying to see if there's anything else different here. Broadcast 2, broadcast 2. Yeah, that's pretty much, I think that's pretty much it here. Okay, let's look at some JavaScript. So when you generate an app, you'll have, I think it's called consumer. Yeah, so there's a channel's consumer.js. It returns a function, create consumer. This will in turn give us an object that lets us create subscriptions. And then we also have JavaScript channels index. This is where you can list out the channels that you want to use. I'm not currently using this. This will interesting discussion on this in a bit. Basically, I wanted it to only run on a certain page, but put in an index, it will run on every page. So instead I'm using this in a stimulus controller, so I have a controller group show controller, and just to show what page this is referencing, I have a group show HTML, and that's basically being attached to the controller with this, and then I have a data attribute for the ID. So controller setting up some targets, and then when the page loads, getting the group ID, and then using the consumer, which I'm importing up here on line 2. The consumer subscriptions create. These are the attributes for the subscription. So really what's required is the channel, and then everything else is just metadata that you can provide, and that's available as params in the group channel setup. And then you set up a few callback functions. These are very similar to the backend. So for backend, we have subscribed, received, and unsubscribed. Front end, we have connected, disconnected, received. And here I'm just, when I connect, I'm setting up your mouse listener. When you disconnect, I'm removing that. And then when we receive a message, I'm processing that message depending on if it's a cursor activity, new chat message, or a change in the user leave or disconnect. So that's setting up the subscription. And then to send messages, let's look at mouse move. So as you move your mouse, it's grabbing the X and Y coordinates of your window, and then it's using that subscription object and just calling send with an object of the data. So this will take care of the serialization for you. It will serialize it as JSON, and then similarly on the back end, it will deserialize it into a Ruby hash. And then when you disconnect, you can do subscriptions removed. So not sure I pointed this out up here, but when you do consumer subscriptions create, it returns a subscription object. You can then use, so this is what you use to send messages, and you can also use this to unsubscribe. So if for whatever reason you're done with the subscription, you don't have to wait until the user leaves the page to unsubscribe. You can just do, where was it? You do subscriptions remove, and that will disconnect it won't disconnect the socket. It will unsubscribe you from that channel. So that is how the front end and back end works. Any questions so far? All right. So I wanted to dive a little bit into how the adapters work. So I go back to cable, we're using solid cable, right? And just to point out right now, this is still, this appears to be an external gem from Rails. They haven't fully brought it in. So, but when you generate a new app, it will include it for you. It'll also include solid cache and solid queue. I removed them here for deployment purposes.
I don't think they're going to be rolled in. I think they're always going to be separate.
What's the reasoning behind that?
Well, they're usable independent of Rails.
Right, so that doesn't make sense, because even if you were to use Redis, you still have to bring in Redis. Yeah. Okay, so solid cable works by sending messages or saving messages to the database. So open that up again. So notice you have two configurations. We have polling interval and message retention. Polling interval is how often ActionCable will hit your database to look for new messages. And then message retention is what it sounds like, how often should those messages be stored. I found that one to be a little tricky. It's every 30 seconds there is a cleanup, but it doesn't actually clean up all the messages. So like even ones that have been broadcast out. So there's probably some complexity to that, but have some fun with this. Grab some space, open up the console. While that's running, I'm going to refresh this, and then I'm going to send a message. And so we have a few things in the log history, right? So this is the server log. So in development, we can see every message that's transmitted. So this group channel transmitting the message. Now in the console, I should be able to retrieve that message because it was saved to the Postgres database. So the model is solid cable message, and I should be able to just get last. And then if we inspect that, here we go. We have an ID, we have the channel it was sent to, payload, and its timestamp. And I learned that you can actually use this model to broadcast too. So if for some reason I wanted to rebroadcast the same message, I can do solid cable message broadcast, and it takes a channel and a payload. So you do message, channel, and message payload, and we see up here it rebroadcasts the same message. And if we look at our front end, it resend. So there is a cleanup thing here. I don't know if I'll accurately demo it, but I could do solid cable message count. That might not be working. I was expecting a little less than that, although we can definitely see it add messages if I move the cursor around. I do count again. Yeah, added 5 messages, which I feel like we probably add more than 5 messages, but yeah, hard to tell. It is, it should be cleaning out messages after some time though, so pointing that out. So that's solid cable. Now, if we wanted to use Redis, it would work similarly. I have a branch for Redis. Discard my changes. And so now the adapter has changed to Redis, pointing to a local Redis URL and giving it a channel prefix. So restart server. And now I'm going to try to do the same thing I did with solid cable. So I'm going to refresh that. No root matches. Did it delete my... Okay, that's weird. So I'll send a message. Still said we sent a message, but how do we know we're actually using Redis? So we'll open a Redis CLI, and then we can do monitor. And if I move the cursor around, we'll see the messages are showing up in both the Rails log and the Redis log. So I'm going to send another message here. I want to now take this message and rebroadcast it. So I can copy the message, the JSON string, and then I'll actually have to open up another CLI. So the command is publish. The channel is cursor sockets development group 1, and then the message. So one response, and then we saw it republish, and then there it is up there too. So yeah, I'm not sure how useful it is to look at Redis or look at solid cable, but I guess when you're setting this up, probably good to know about in case you have to debug something. You want to ensure that the adapter is in fact receiving messages and publishing messages. It's a good way to know how to do that. That's most of what I had. So that I didn't really include, but it's not fully, I didn't fully understand it, but I'll bring it up anyway. I've for a while been wanting to know the difference between how threading works in WebSockets and ActionCable versus threading in server-side defense. So some of you might remember I demoed how to do a server-side defense chat thing in Rails, and one of the issues with that is it would quickly consume server threads. So I'm using Puma, and it has a default dev thread of 5. If I open 5 tabs and they all make connections, it uses up all 5 threads, and when I open the 6th tab, the threads are all used up. That request can't get picked up. ActionCable doesn't have that problem, even though we're using threading in Puma to set up that connection. So just to show real quick that we can actually fulfill. What's here? Where do they hit?
There's an X at the bottom. You're forever drawn on.
Forever drawn on. All right. I think I opened something in Linux, but we're almost done anyway. So if I open a few more tabs here, I'm just going to put random letters and names. So yeah, we have everything is still working pretty fine here. So when I was looking at the docs, I'll bring up the docs next, or I guess technically the guide. Action cable. Yeah, I guess we'll search for it. So there's a section down here on connections. What was it called? Yeah, so there's a section here on the thread pool. There's something else too. But ActionCable runs on its own thread pool, and from at least what I can understand, it's taking control of the socket after it's set up, and then any activity is run through the ActionCable worker pool as opposed to the web server, Puma, or whatever you're using through its threading. So, so if you're using Puma, essentially it's kind of released control of that socket, and ActionCable is now managing for you. And I think it's like, yeah, here we go. This is the plot I was looking for. So the ActionCable server implements rack socket hijacking API, therefore allowing the use of a multi-threaded pattern for managing connections internally, irrespective of whether the application server is multi-threaded or not. So it is able to handle that independent of your server threading. So I still don't fully understand how that works, but it is separate. It's not holding up. It's not holding onto your server threads every time you make a connection. So that's pretty much all I have. Any questions?
Did you figure out whatever you were asking in Slack about?
No. So essentially, it's a good question. I'll take care of this doc here, the line. So in this staff example, I wanted to create a socket connection whenever I join a channel, right? I don't want to initiate that subscription when I'm on the index page. So the other examples for creating channels.
Isn't there a helper? It's like subscribe to, and then you give it an ID.
Subscribe.
It's the same way that the sockets for turbo streams work. You say, you turbo subscribe to thing, and then say you're on a show page, you could have it only subscribe to that specifically to that instance.
Yeah, I'd give an example. I'd love to see that, because it's here. There is there's a scaffold thing. I don't think it's documented here, but like you tell it to create a channel. So here they have docs in their guide for creating a chat channel, and it's just importing consumer, using the consumer to create the subscription, but then you have to include that. Well, now they don't have here. They don't tell you how to actually use the channel, but the scaffold will put it in channels index, and that would make it invoke on globally every page. Channel messages. Yeah, okay. Oh, it was this annotate thing. It's part of Zoom. I'm gonna stop sharing for a minute. So I hear this.
Zoom.
Yep, it went away. Yeah, there were actually two additional workarounds when I was using the stimulus controller because the link to helper I learned does a, by default, it now uses Turbo and it has a prefetch. So it'll actually make the request when you hover over the link.
Yes.
And so you don't want that to hit, and you have to disable that.
Yeah, it's always weird. It always freaks me out when you don't realize that's happening, and like you happen to be looking at your log, you move the cursor over like a menu, just like swipe up on the menu,
Oh, and like,
and you just see it like the log go as it preloads like all those pages. You're like, what just happened? Okay, so the helper is a turbo helper. Turbo string from, but weirdly, it's doing the same thing. So if you put turbo string from in your views and view helper, and then look at the socket channel, you can see that it's subscribing to this specific thing. And so I might look through that to see how they're using ActionCable.
okay. What's the function called?
Turbo string from. Yeah, because you can give it a channel object or a channel class, a specific ID and data.
I see. So it's actually like an ERB helper you can put.
Yeah, you might actually just be able to use that and get rid of it. I don't think there's anything specific about Turbo. You'd have to look at the underlines first.
Interesting. See, this makes a lot more sense because I was like, how many folks want to just.
Yeah, so it's making a Turbo cable stream source custom web object.
My question is, how do you get access to the handlers then?
Attributes assign stream name to Turbo stream name.
We could try this real quick. We can just.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to exactly align.
I'm curious what it does nonetheless. We'll stable back for a moment. And then, so stream from, it's going to be the group channel. And we'll just say group ID is our group ID. Stream from.
That's the name.
So it'd have to be like. Oh, yeah, let's just see what that does. I don't like doing this. No way.
So I would first look at what it's building in the source.
Yeah, we take a look at it. It did.
Okay,
something.
so we made a turbo cable request. It's doing the same thing. Here's your subscription to the group channel.
I see, yeah, and it did take the attribute that I sent you. It was the first one up here.
That's the normal cable.
That's the normal cable. So it's doing 2 subscribes? What's the difference between the normal cable and the turbo cable?
One I think is there because, well, you also have, do you have a syntax there? You've got a greater than on the page. You need something's not.
Oh.
It's probably the comment.
It's just this.
Yeah. There it is. It was still there. Okay. That might have been there from before.
Okay, so I think yeah, you're right. So it did subscribe.
If you type something, does it still work?
No, because I didn't pass enough. I didn't pass the metadata out.
Oh.
And I have an event handler that's also living in the controller. So like when I type enter,
Okay.
and we're not getting the cursor activity, so. Yeah, I'm just curious. I can think of this more offline. I just, if you set up a channel this way, like, I suppose if you're just receiving messages, but even still, you want to have some way to process those, right? Streams channel.
So which subscriptions create? Subscribe to.
And maybe when you receive a message, it goes through it. I haven't used much Turbo, so probably don't fully understand it. Well, maybe it goes through your endpoint, like your controller.
You can. That's what Turbo does.
So then when you receive a message from your channel, it reposts to your controller, and you can do stuff.
Well,
there.
It's poorly named. There is a Turbo stream, and there are Turbo streams.
I didn't get that.
Sorry, Siri. No. A turbo stream is a custom DOM element
Okay.
that is injected into the page that issues commands. So JavaScript knows to look for that. Also, TurboStream is a MIME type. So it's the kind of request that comes through. They really should have changed the name of that.
Because like you can respond to a TurboStream.
Yeah, so when you see it in an action controller like that, that's the MIME type version. So you're saying I can respond to a type of request that is TurboStream. But when you send a stream, like if you say, view, you have the TurboStream helper as well. You say TurboStream.update something. You're actually creating HTML that is a TurboStream element.
You have two sides, but you have the MIME type, and then you have the element, the JavaScript.
They should have made it different. They should not have the same name.
Yeah.
If you're done, I can show the validation stuff if you want, if anyone's interested. How do I get into Slack? Oh, it's on the meetup?
Yeah, it's on the meetup. If you're able to just click that link.
Open the Zoom. Cool, hey. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Zoom is requesting access to the button. Okay. Whatever. Oh, interesting. Why was it screen sharing all of your Slack controls, but it's not screen sharing mine?
Probably because I'm on Ubuntu.
Freaking Linux!
Yep.
Oh, okay.
I have some work to do to figure out if it's possible to dismiss that stuff.
Okay, so I don't want to show that. Can you get rid of this? All right, let's get rid of that. All right, let's get rid of that. Woo. Okay. So validations that you want to have custom text for. There's a lot of ways you can do this. Let's do one of these, I think. Of course, I picked the file that I had. Okay. So let's take this validation as an example. Actually, let me attach one. We have, we're validating total cost, the kind of validation, but for this particular one, we want to not only customize the message, but we want to pass data in that's different than the validation allows. So validations, and you can pass things into a validation in the ITN file, and you can interpolate them this way, but it has to be something given to it. Normally, it's only, I I think it's attribute count.
You'd have to, in this case, you'd have to have a price as the
Right,
attribute.
so I would have to have price, and I don't have that at all. In the specific one we were looking at was invoice, so total cost.
So you have value and
Invoice,
count.
yeah, so this one's looking for value and count. So value, I think, is given to us, but in this particular case, I think I wanted to modify it. So yeah, so value, I didn't want it to be the value of it entirely. I wanted it to be a money object and formatted. Or I want it to be formatted as money, so I'm using a money object by taking the value from the data, converting it to a money object, and stringing it out so it would be formatted.
As you wanted to intercept the key. So like the value and count would be attributes that you would normally just go in there, right? Like when
yeah, so in
building
this,
the message.
in this case, I'm not adding anything custom as far as the values that are coming into the validator. I'm modifying them. So I'm not adding, I'm customizing the thing that's there already. I'm not adding something custom. So the big problem is the key. So by default, Rails is already looking in certain places for IETN keys. In this particular case, it's an active model, so that's why it's nested under active model. But like if you're on just a regular active record model, it'll be under active record. Or there are higher level items, guides. Let's do IETN. Models. So by default, it's going to be looking in these places. So 5 different paths that it can take to find the translation. I'm being specific in my case, so I'm giving it the full path. I'm customizing it a bit just so it wouldn't collide with anything else. Clearly, this is cumbersome because I have to provide all this data. So I tried different things like, hey, can I use a relative path and maybe do something like this? So we know we're going up there until, maybe, well, let's take customer. Let's say we want to do that. That nests it under EN, but not under, it's not building it and then adding this to it. It's just trying to get this directly. And that's going to complain because it can't find that. So that's a key problem. Here, like I said, I'm customizing the data and then I'm passing it back into IETN. So I'm just taking the message data that's there and then merging in this stuff. So that's how I was doing it previously. I'd really like that to go away. Solve, go away. So I came up with a different way to do it. And actually, I want to show you this way first. So I was doing the same thing here. Now, all of these validations are all on price sense. They're just in different scenarios. So I don't want it to just go on price sense like it normally would, because it's going to look for a validation error price sense. In this case, it's going to look for greater than or equal to. So that would normally look like, what's that final list? Great. So normally that would look like this. If you wanted to customize one of the validations, if I had a numericality validation with equal to something, it would find this path. And then you could give it something custom. Normally it'll be like, must be equal to, I forget what it says by default. Actually, I think it is. It must be equal to, that's probably, what is it, percent running? I think that's what it would say by default. Clearly, I don't want that because I could have multiple equal tos, just they might be triggered a different way, and I might need a message that's different.
Where's your condition on that?
It's in the validation itself. So I'm saying
so
only trigger this if this case.
So you'd have like multiple validations on like the same numericality rule, but then the if.
Yeah, and so this example I have. I'm iterating through different keys, and I'm building the same validation just based on if it's that particular key. But it's still going to be less than or equal to, so I can't do an internationalization on that key. So I have to give it something different. So one thing I learned is that I knew you could pass message as a key to the validator and do your own custom message. So normally that would look like this, ha 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 ha. You can do that all day long. And you could also pass it a block, which we saw before, and then you give the object and the message data. But I found out that if you give it just the key, it will use that as the lookup. And the nice thing about that is that it's going to append that to the 5 different paths. So I'm not limited to just the hard-coded one I gave it. So now I can go here and see that section rate decreases here. So it's going to look at models, dues, finalized rate, attributes, price sense, section rate decrease.
So it's going to live at the same level as if it were equal to or greater than or equal to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's looking for it in the places it would normally look like, as if it were at that same level. So that's one cool thing. That was a big win. So that cleaned up some stuff. Now I still have the problem if I want to provide it custom data, how do I go about that? Because I still, just to provide it custom data means I now have to pass that into I18N, which means I need a key. So weirdly, nothing in Rails just gives you the list of keys. You always have to go look for it. But what I came up with today is that active model error has a class method called generateMessage. And because it's a class method, I don't need to know about anything outside. I can just pass it the data I want. So if I say, hey, generate me a message for this attribute, this type, with the object and then whatever data I want, it's going to do the exact same thing the default validation would do. But now I can customize to my heart's content.
Oh, okay, so in this case, rate is your object.
Rate is the thing, because remember, if you do a block for a message, it gets the object that's being validated and then message data.
Okay.
Which is anything, so like equal, or the value I think is going to be 5,000. That's what you passed into the validator. And then count.
Okay, so then
count would be this one.
So ordinarily message data would have like value, but in this case, you're adding another attribute to it.
Yeah.
Which can then be picked up
so I'm adding,
in I18N.
I'm adding a price, which then, because my custom message is interpolating price, it can use it. And so now this is a lot cleaner. I don't have to really know the keys anymore. A side benefit is I don't even have to have the keys at that level. If I said, on multiple models, I want this message, or this key to have a specific message, I could do that even higher. I could come here and say, I want it here, section rate decrease or whatever it's called, and then delete it from the model level, and it would be picked up everywhere. because of those different
It's like,
paths.
it's looking for them in order.
Yeah, so it goes from most specific to least. And then the final win here is the clients wanted messages like this. Not a normal validation. I have options. If I call full messages on a validator, I'm going to get the attribute and the message. So this would actually equate to this.
Yes.
Which is gross and doesn't make sense because of the way I'm capitalizing.
That's what I was saying before, like, so many folks end up putting the error on base because they don't want this.
Right, and so I can solve this too. Well, there's a couple things. So in this particular test, it's testing message, so it's not a complete good green, but if I said full message, this is what I would see. That's clearly not what I want. I want this when I call full message. There is a way now, since Rails 6, I think, to customize the full message. You have to flip a flag that's not on by default, which I think is weird.
I forget what message they redid or revamped the errors thing in 6. I remember having to refactor some stuff on errors, like the interface changed.
They did where it returns an object instead of collections.
Yes.
So now you can call where.
Yeah, you can't iterate over it anymore.
So you have to. I'm doing this weird, I think, because this app is weird. But if you do config, like in your application RB, if you were to do config active model I18N customize full message equals true, this enables this ability. I wasn't able to do it here, so this is actually what that config is setting, so I'm just setting this directly. But what it allows you to do is to provide a format, and that's what it uses to generate the full message. So by default, format looks like this.
So prefixes the attribute first.
Yeah.
And so you don't want that. You
don't want that. I just want my message to be the only thing that's there. So now when I call message or full message, I'm getting exactly what I gave it, which is going to be these things. And so now our Rails just looks like Rails, and I'm not doing weird things like deleting the first part of the string off or putting things on base where it doesn't need to be. Like everything can live where it's supposed to live. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, that last thing is fantastic. I've definitely been bothered by that because like you might want to reach for errors on specific attributes because that's what you're working with. You don't necessarily need the errors of the whole thing. So now you put errors where they belong, and the messages still can make sense. You can customize them.
Yep. That's it. Any questions?
Thanks for sharing.
All right, well, good.
All right. Any other questions, comments, things to show off? Anything? All right.
No.